So we're going to start by learning how to draw the eye. Yesterday we just learned that the eye is like an almond or a lemon shape. Today we're going to learn more about how the eye is physically put together, like how we take that eyeball that's a sphere and we get that almond or lemon shape out of it. So we're going to start by drawing the eyeball, and we're going to draw a circle on our page. It can be fairly big, that's fine. Bigger is better than smaller for this. All right, and notice how I'm sketching to kind of create that perfect circle shape. I'm not doing a perfect circle all at once. I'm sketching to get the shape I need, and then I can use my eraser to take out what I don't need. So that sphere is my eyeball. Inside that eyeball, we have the iris. That's the colored part of our eye. So when we say my eyes are blue, my eyes are brown, we're talking about the iris. The iris is about half the size of our eyeball. All right, so we draw it like this. Again, I'm just sketching it out to get the shape I need and using my eraser to perfect it. Please remember my motto, draw light till you get it right, because you don't want to draw a really dark line and then be stuck with it when it's wrong. Try your best to get your iris centered in your eyeball, because it's always going to be smack dab in the center. And then inside the iris, we have our pupil. Make sure that's centered as well. And I'm going to shade my pupil in a little bit just so I remember that it is, in fact, my pupil. All right. So I've got an eyeball. But obviously, this is not what we see when we look at somebody's face. Because over our eyeball, we have skin that forms our eyelids, and it's part of what holds our eye inside our skull. There's also other stuff in there that holds it in, but the eyelids are part of it. Now I'm going to draw my left eye, which means that the corner of my eye is going to be on this side, right here. All right, now the inner corners of our eye always have a little extra space next to it, and that's our tear duct. So on one side, the corner is going to be a little bit away from the eyelid, and on the outer corner of our eye, the corner is going to be right at the edge of our eyeball. Making sense? All right. So for our top eyelid, it goes from the inner corner that's further away from our eyeball, and it curves across our eyeball and slightly overlaps with our iris. Okay, so you can see here, I've drawn it slightly over the iris. When you're drawing eyes, you need to keep in mind the specific person that you're drawing. And you really want to use a reference photo or have that person actually in front of you whenever possible. Because everybody's different, obviously, unless you're an identical twin. Which means that some people's eyelids, they curve higher up. Or some people's corner of their eyes are lower or higher. So you need to keep all those things in mind as you are drawing that specific person. And draw what you see. Not what you see in your head, but what is actually on that person's face to get a good likeness. Today, since we're just learning the basics, we can be a little more general, but I'm reminding you that when you're doing this for real, you want to be looking at what you see. The bottom eyelid kind of curves out from the tear duct, and it skims the bottom of the iris. It usually doesn't cover the iris on the bottom, and comes up to meet the upper eyelid. And the upper eyelid curves just a little bit over our lower eyelid. All right. So anatomy-wise, we're almost done here. There's just a few more little lines we need to draw. First off, we need to draw our crease in our upper eyelid. So everyone has a crease above their eye. It's where their eyeball meets their brow bone. Some people have a deep crease, some people have a shallow crease. It's going to depend on the person you're actually drawing. But it usually hits somewhere around here, okay? So it's not all the way at the top of the eyeball, it's a little bit in front. And it's just a pretty basic curve, like so. And the lower eye, everybody's going to have a couple of little lines, slight lines underneath. They are not dark. If you do dark lines or dark shadows under your eyes, you are going to look really old and tired, and you are not old or tired. You are young and vibrant. All right, so we do not make those lines dark at all. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my eraser to just clean up some of these lines that I don't need anymore. Now, because I really don't need to know that much more about my eyeball here. So I'm left with my eye shape. Now, what is going to take this eye from all right to wow, that's awesome, is shading. All right, so we are going to go back to the skills we learned with our hallway project to do some shading. Starting with the iris. Now, unless your irises are white, they're going to be shaded a little bit darker than the white of your eyeball itself. And usually, irises have a little bit of like a sunburst around the pupil. Something like this. All right? If you look deeply into the eyes of somebody near you, you're going to see that sort of sunburst. So I want you to draw on that sunburst. And I also want you to shade in the iris. All right? It doesn't have to be super dark. Again, it's going to depend on whoever you end up drawing. If they have brown eyes, you're going to be shading a whole lot darker than if they have light blue eyes. Now, I'm not doing my best shading today just so we can get through this, but you guys understand the idea. I'll go and I'll shade my pupil a little bit darker. because my pupil is always black. A little pro tip for you guys. Our eyes are always like slightly wet. They have a layer of moisture on them that protects them. And when things are wet, they are shiny. So they will have highlights. So you can take your eraser, just give yourself a little highlight somewhere in your eye. Kind of erase it out like that. It's gonna give your portrait a much more lifelike quality. Just darkening up my pupil and my iris just a little bit more. Last step for the iris, usually a person's iris has a darker ring around the edge of it. Not always, but usually you've got a darker ring. So I'm going to go ahead and shade that in. All right. So you can see now I've got my iris, my pupil, all shaded in. Then we're going to move to the outer corners of the eyeball, starting with the tear duct. So we can see here where the tear duct meets the eyelid, or the eyeball. Right in that space where the two meet, we shade it nice and dark. And as we work towards the outside, it gets lighter. All right. On the eyeball itself, since it's a sphere, it has shading along the outer edges. All right, so along the edge of the eyeball, I shade, and it gets lighter as it goes in towards the center of the eye. Just like that. And we do the same thing in the other corner. We shade right in the corner, and it gets lighter as it goes in towards the center of the eye. The last bit of shading we do on the eyeball itself. Usually our upper eyelid casts a slight shadow onto our eyeball. So we do just a little bit of shading under that eyelid. Just a little bit of shading here. All right, like so. Everyone with me still? Making sense? Wonderful. Now we've got a shade around the eye. And I'm going to start with the crease. The crease is going to be darker because light cannot really get into that space between our eye and our brow bone. So I shade it. The crease itself is going to be darkest, but there's going to be a pretty decent shadow on either side of it. But then as the crease gets less deep, I'm going to lighten up with my pencil. So I've shaded the crease. I'm also going to kind of carry this shading from the crease around the tear duct. But I'm going to leave a little bit of space. There's usually a little highlight right here next to the tear duct, and I shade right next to that highlight. And then that shadow is going to very lightly continue down into that space where we created those two really, really light lines. Remember, we do not want super dark shadows under our eyes. We are not old or tired. We are young and vibrant, so no dark shadows, just very light shading. I'm not doing my best shading here just for time's sake. Now, as I'm shading under the eye, I'm actually going to leave a little bit of space between the eyelid and the shading. There's going to be this little space of highlight that I'm creating. All right. So I've got my shading here. Everybody still with me? Last step for an eye, eyelashes. We all have eyelashes, okay? So drawing eyelashes on somebody does not make them look feminine. What makes someone look feminine is really exaggerating the eyelashes, making it look like they wear mascara. If you want to draw like mascara and eyelashes, go right ahead, be my guest. But you cannot skip the eyelashes altogether. Eyelashes curve away from the center of the eye, kind of like a sun. If you picture when a little kid draws a sun, the lines come out away from it. It's similar with eyelashes. So if I start in the outer corner, I do these long kind of curved eyelashes that curve away. And they're all pretty irregular, okay? They're all different lengths. They all go at slightly different angles. Right? But I'm not making them super, super long. I'm going for a more like natural look here. And as I work my way in towards the center, they're starting to get shorter, and they aren't as curved. As I start to work my way away, they get a little thinner, but they start to curve outward again. It's the same thing with the bottom eyelashes, but we tend to have less of them. All right, so I curve outward, but I am doing less, and I am making them just a little bit lighter. All right. And there we have an eye. I'll give you guys a second to finish up. The next facial feature we're working on is the nose. So yesterday we learned about how the nose is made with 3 circles. We're going to do that here on our page. I'm going to do it right here off to the side. I'm doing one big circle in the center. And I'm doing 2 smaller circles on either side that just slightly overlap. And notice again, I'm just sketching them in. I can refine the shape with my eraser. So we're going to start with the edges of our nostrils. We're going to use this outer edge of our circles for our nostrils, but we're actually going to extend the circle up a little bit and in a little bit. Okay, so it's almost like I'm taking that circle and I'm turning it into like a parenthesis almost. And then in this center, where I have my big circle, that's the tip of my nose, I'm going to continue this circle up and over. So I'm giving that circle like little wings. All right, you see how it's got little wings now that extend into the nostril circles? And then I loop those wings back in on themselves. I turn them into little teardrop shapes. Little teardrop shapes, just like that. So now I have a full-on bottom of my nose right here. I've got nostrils, nostril holes, got the tip of my nose. We're all wearing masks right now, so it's kind of hard to see, but our noses don't really have that many lines to them. As far as lines go, this is it. The rest is all shading. So I'm actually going to take my eraser and get rid of the inside of these circles. I might still see them a little bit because I am going to use them to help with my shading. All right, but I've erased them out mostly. Then, for shading, I start by shading on the outside of my nostril curves. All right, we always get some shadows on the outside here. And we always get some shadow under the tip of our nose here. So we shade that. And I'm actually going to continue that shading down in the center. This creates that little indent that connects our nose to our lips. Is this looking familiar? Looking like a nose? Then, yesterday I taught you how to draw a line to kind of show the bridge of your nose with two curves. Instead of curves, today we're shading. So we take the shading that we started on the sides of our nostrils and we continue it up. It gets a little lighter. I'm not doing my best shading work today, but you still get the idea. All right, so I'm continuing that shading. It's a little bit lighter at the edges. Now this shading continues all the way up to the eyebrows, okay? So I'm kind of drawing in the eyebrows here so you know where they are. Got my eyes kind of here. So you know how what this spacing looks like. Everybody's nose is a little bit different. Again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Everyone looks different, so everyone's nose looks different. The wider the space for your highlight is, the flatter the bridge of their nose is going to look. Some people have flatter noses, some people have narrower noses. So if I need a narrower nose, I just bring the shadow in. All right, bringing the shadow in makes the nose narrower. as far as the tip of the nose goes, I'm just shading in a little bit on the bottom side of the tip of my nose. And I continue that shading up, and I kind of wrap it around the nostril and the tip of my nose just a little bit, which is where those circles I drew comes in handy to help direct where my shading is. Right. So if I have deeper indents in any areas, I can shade it a little bit darker. And we have a nose. How's everybody feeling about the nose? Good? All right. So we've got 10 minutes left in class. That's just enough time to do the lips. Our lips, we are going to start by just drawing the center line between our top and our bottom lip. All right, draw that center line. Now, we talked yesterday about how everyone has that curve in the center of their top lip. We call it the Cupid's bow. Some people have a very shallow Cupid's bow where it's just a slight curve. Some people have a much deeper Cupid's bow. This is where you're going to have to, again, look at the person you are drawing to get it correct. Now, the thicker their top lip is, the higher you need to draw the Cupid's bow. All right, so I'm going to make kind of like a medium thickness for mine. I have a medium depth for the Cupid's bow, and it's smack dab in the middle. On either side of that Cupid's bow, we do a gentle slope downward. Remember to picture that gentle sledding hill for little kids. And we do not want that slope to actually touch our center line. We want it to go just above that center line. All right, and try and get the same slope on both sides of the lip. Our bottom lip, much more simple. It's just one curve. And again, how thick the lip is determines how much of a curve you have. And the ends of the lip are actually going to not quite touch that center line. And it's going to stop right before the top lip does. Okay, so our bottom lip is usually a little bit smaller than our top lip. All right. Feeling good so far? For that center part, under the Cupid's bow, we usually have another little dip, and then it actually curves slightly up above that center line. Okay, it curves slightly up above that center line. You will need to check whoever you were drawing a portrait of, though, for exactly how their lip is shaped. With shading, because shading's our next step here, lips are pretty simple shape-wise. Our top lip is always going to be a little darker than our bottom lip. So I'm going to start shading it And as I go towards the edges, I'm gonna lighten up. This is what stops us from looking like we're wearing lipstick. All right, we need to get it lighter towards the edges. All right, so I shade the whole thing. I'm coming towards the other end now, so I'm going to start to lighten up just a little bit. And then towards the center of the top lip, I'm going to get it a little bit darker. A little bit darker. Now our lips are actually pretty wrinkly. So I'm going to draw in some lines that again have like a little bit of like a sunburst to them. They curve more as we go towards the outside. All right, I'm just giving it a little bit of texture here. Like so. For our bottom lip, we need to shade that in as well, but it should be a little bit lighter than our top lip. So I'm shading that in. But then I go back once it's all shaded. Where that top and bottom lip meet, I'm going to shade in a fairly dark shadow because the top lip is going to cast a shadow over my bottom lip. So I'm shading that all in. Not my best shading work, but we're a little pressed for time. And towards the bottom of my bottom lip, I'm going to shade a little bit as well because our bottom lip usually has a bit of a curve to it. And on the sides of my bottom lip, I might even shade a little bit off. This helps define the shape of the lip and also kind of stops us from looking like we're wearing lipstick. Unless, of course, you want to wear lipstick. You do you. And then under the bottom lip, shade in a little bit. All right, some people have less of a shadow underneath their bottom lip. Some people have more of a shadow. Depends on the person. We shade in right above the top lip. And that's that shadow, that little indent that connects our lip to our nose. So it's the same thing we've got here. These two would connect. And lastly, we add the same wrinkles to our bottom lip. Again, they have a bit of like a sunburst look to them. And we have lips. All right. So there we have eyes, nose, and lips that can be plugged in on a face right where we learned to put them.